Hello and welcome to the Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show right now on Indian television where you, the MSME, get center stage to voice your opinions and thoughts. This is ET Now's special daily initiative to give MSMEs and entrepreneurs the opportunity to be front and center on every industry and area that matters to you. Today on the show, we're talking about the regulatory framework and the changes that the realty space in India has seen, and talking specifically about the changes for the housing market. To discuss that, we have our experts in studio. Let me start with Pranay Vakil. He's the chairman of Pranay Consultancy. We have Rohit Poddar. He's the MD of Poddar Housing. We also have Rajan Bandelkar. He's the vice president Neredco West. He's also the MD of the Ronak Group. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for being with us here tonight to talk about the legislation, the framework, everything which is changing and the impact it's going to have as far as the housing market goes, whether it's the buyer or the seller. And there are so many stakeholders and there are equally number of changes when it comes to regulation for the real estate market. Maybe we can start by talking about RERA. Let me start with you, Mr. Vakil. I know RERA is something that's been in the works for so long now. Now that we've seen the framework and, the fine print really, is it all positive? Are there any concerns now?
Well, it depends on which state you're talking about, because as you know, some of the states have taken liberties with what the center wanted, right? In fact, as we speak, a committee is appointed in Delhi to kind of overview what are the relaxations made by each of the states compared to the Center Act. So it's very different for different acts, especially things which concern developers, things which concern payment of interest, things which concern, these are the things where the states have taken some liberties. But overall, I think it's a damn good thing to have happened. Regulation was needed in real estate and it has finally come. That is going to really up the confidence that the buyer has, is going to up the confidence that the lender has in lending money. And I think overall, I think it's a good thing to have happened.
Okay, Mr. Bandelkar, would you agree?
Very much. And we at Neredco, we have welcomed Maharashtra RERA. And I want to once again mention and congratulate even Maharashtra government, the Honorable CM, as well as our chairman, Gautam Chatterjee. We have got excellent human being as a RERA chairman who has got all positive approach for all the segment of the people. It is not only for developers, even for consumers also he is very proactive. And I have earlier also in my talk shows and in my interviews I have mentioned RERA, I don't know why people are worried or scared. It is very, very simple. I have explained RERA in just 2 words. Two words is that speak truth.
Would you agree?
I think so. I think it's been a long it's been a long time coming as an act, and I think that if you just follow the rules, it's quite simple. I mean, as a developer also, I think if you just follow the rules, the chances of completing the project on time, delivering good quality product becomes that much easier. So I think it's a very well thought out act, and I think the government of Maharashtra has actually implemented it in a very practical way. So I'm very positive about the act.
Only one thing what we are telling, what is a miss in RERA is that they are telling us to follow each and everything. But unfortunately, all the approving authorities, they are not at all anywhere near to the ambit within the RERA rules. As well as today, we don't get raw materials. See, cement prices, you must have seen, cement prices have risen at least 40%. In last 3 months, there's nothing. If you see any price indexation, everything has gone down, people are telling. But the cement and steel prices are increasing. We don't get sand, we don't get metal. The government is sitting, environment people are telling you don't take the quarries and do. If we don't get raw material, how we are going to construct, how we are going to build?
So there's still a lot of concerns.
Yeah, because what happens, we have to give them the possession date. And if you don't get material, how you can complete your work? So that's a big question mark which government needs to interfere and implement and bring them into the ambience.
So it's a good thing for the buyers because right now it's definitely profitability and it's definitely accountability rather for them. But as someone who's in the space, as a developer, talk to our MSME viewers about what and how the responsibilities and the challenges are changing for builders.
So I mean, the point is this: you have to. I mean, I'm not giving a generalization, but in the past, people have taken money into one project, put it into the other, and so on and so forth. That's not allowed. It shouldn't be allowed in the first place. It's not allowed anymore. I mean, I'd first urge all the developers to read the act in detail, and go meet their lawyer and figure out what is it that will affect them practically in their project. But there are a few basic rules. Okay, 70% of all monies that come in have to be spent on the project itself. But that doesn't mean only material. It can be spent on your overheads and salaries as well. Okay, 30% is basically kept there, which has to be kept until the end of the project. Sorry, so 30% can be removed from the escrow account as profit based on the budget which you actually give. So be very careful in making a budget. Talk to your chartered accountant, talk to your engineers, talk to your contractors, and so on and so forth. Make a proper budget, and then make sure you adhere to the budget. I think this is one of the major.
Is this going to impact profitability though?
I don't think so at all. I mean, it may affect somewhat your treasury income, depending on how much treasury income you have. But other than that, I don't expect profitability to be hurt by this. I think, in fact, in the medium to long term, once the market reacts to the act and starts complying with it, you'll actually see projects being completed on time, which means you actually make more money as a developer.
The prices could go up, and let me explain to you why. Most developers were taking on a project, sometimes in collaboration with or joint venture with a landowner. So their investment was really going into construction, marketing, and all of that, right? Now, there was a peak requirement of investment. You build a brochure, you start taking your bookings, you take the money, sometimes even have negative working capital. Now, you will not have that benefit. The amount that you are required to invest into the project will be much higher after the RERA has come in, because only after the approvals are received that you can take the booking. All of that, So therefore, it could reflect onto the price, because the peak investments from developers will go up in every project compared to what it was before.
Okay, so fair enough. I want to talk about the impact that an increase in prices is going to have for MSME developers. But before that, you were talking very briefly about GST. That is the other big regulation that the industry is seeing. What is going to be the immediate impact? What should MSME developers keep in mind about the biggest changes which will come in under GST?
See, I will tell you, people who are worrying about RERA, they shouldn't worry about RERA.
The bigger worry is GST.
Bigger worry, or there are so many implied implications of GST, which even today, see, government is also working on it. Earlier, if you see, we had abatement on land cost, which I believe today government is not ready to give abatement on land cost. And if they don't give abatement on land cost, let me tell you very, very honestly, the prices in all metros, it is not Mumbai, all metros, the prices will go at least 10 to 12% higher. And that will be not because the government, neither the developer is going to benefit it, only consumer is going to be penalized and government is going to get advantage of it.
Do you think all of these things will get sorted out as we go, say, into 2018? By then these teething problems would have been sorted out?
I doubt, because once the government knows that they are going to get money, none of the government, see, whichever taxes or whatever prices have increased, they have never come down. So it's very difficult. So we, as our body, we are trying, we are lobbying with the government and we are requesting them that ultimately the consumer who is paying the taxes, it doesn't affect us as a developer. Yes, it will affect us as our sales, because the sales will dip for a time period. But what will happen the moment sales dips, the new launches will become lesser and lesser. So the demand would be there and supply would reduce. The moment the gap, it creates a gap between demand and supply, 101% the prices are going to go up.
But Rohit, do you think that this is then going to be a rationalization really of supply and demand? Because you had this huge supply that was happening about 4 or 5 years ago, then demand started falling. Now is it going to be that both are going to match?
I think it depends on the sector of in which you're actually addressing. Just to go back to a point that Mr. Vakil is actually making. See, the point is this: price rise, if you have skinny capital as your modus operandi in any business, that can't last, right? So the fact is this: whether you're the MSEM sector or the large sector or the small sector, it's not relevant. The real estate business globally is not a skinny capital business. So it should be adequately capitalized. Whatever the effect of that is, that's the reality of life. Coming back to the point on prices, if you look at the demand-supply analysis, you have a big skew of oversupply in the luxury space, for example, in Mumbai, but you don't have adequate supply of affordable housing, right? So Sir's, of course, vice president of NAREDCO, and there's been a big drive, whether it's an MCHI, NAREDCO, PIATA, to create more affordable housing stock. So I think in that segment, I mean, if you're looking at the Mumbai market in particular, which is the MMRDA, and looking at a sub 30 lakh rupee market, in my opinion, there's still unmet demand.
Okay.
But Rohit, what happens if you tell in Mumbai, you don't get anything sub 50 lakhs also. Forget about that 30 lakhs.
I think that affordable housing is a slightly larger conversation. I want to take a very quick break at this point. When we come back, let's talk affordable housing, let's talk demonetization, and also how intermediaries like your digital and technology players are really coming in to play. Do stay tuned. We'll be back after this very short break. Welcome back. We are discussing all the changes in policy and regulation that we're seeing for the housing market, whether you are an MSME developer or for the buyer. Just before we took the break, of course, we're talking about two critical pieces of legislation, RERA and GST, and I understand you have a point to add to that, Mr. Vakil.
Well, I want you to take a big sigh of relief as far as GST is concerned, because something which we feared the most has not happened.
Which is?
Let me tell you. There was one clause in the draft GST regulation which says that input credits will not be permitted for real estate segment. That has been removed.
So what is going to be the benefit for developers?
Major change, because now the input credits can be taken by the real estate segment, and let me explain to you what happens. If you are talking about a house which is selling, or a flat which is selling at say 4,000 rupees a square foot, 5,000 rupees a square foot, there it could have a significant impact, because the input cost in that could be as high as 2,500 rupees per square foot. And on that, the cement, steel and everything else, there is a GST which is paid, which can be set off. Okay. It's only when you go to the high segment, like Rahul said, that you are into segment which is 20,000 rupees per square foot plus, that the GST will begin to hurt, because the input credits you'll get will be so small, right? Because the construction cost is not going to change dramatically whether you're selling your stuff for 20,000 rupees a square foot or 5,000 rupees a square foot. Yeah. It'll change, but by 500 rupees a square foot, 1,000 rupees a square foot, not more. And therefore, the hurt will come in the high value segment, where the input credits that you can set off are going to be limited. Okay, and therefore, the full impact of the 18% is going to be felt.
Okay, which is not something a lot of people are talking about at this point.
It's 12%.
12%.
12%. It is 12%, not 18%, because if government listens to him and makes it 18, then we'll be in another
You will be in trouble.
No, I was talking the input credits where you get, that could be 18.
Okay, fair enough. Just before we took the break, Rohit, you were talking about different segments of the market. Affordable housing is another big leg of what a lot of developers are looking at. I know the government is very passionately talking about affordable housing and its vision for affordable housing. How's the demand there being met? What changes should we likely see?
I will tell you one minute, I will tell you before Rohit. See, government is telling they want to make affordable, or they are talking about housing for all, but they are not meaning it.
So what is the definition then of affordable housing?
More than definition, I will tell you, whatever cost of flat is there, I will tell you more than 35%. It ranges between 30 to 40%. So on an average, 35% goes in all your taxes and premiums. So if you buy in Mumbai, if you think your house is costing you 1 crore rupees, 35 lakhs goes to the government. What we are requesting the government, okay, you don't give this tax holidays to a higher segment, but at least affordable segment, whatever they talking, 30 square meter, 45 or 60 square meter homes, whoever builds that, if they give it to that, 101% the prices will come down. And when government is telling prices has to come down, only if government wills and wishes, then only prices will come down. Otherwise, the prices are going to go up because the raw material and cost of construction and all other input costs are going up. So there is no way the prices are going to come down.
Okay.
Yeah, Rohit, you can add on to it.
So I think also in addition to the fact that input prices are an issue, you also don't have single window clearance for affordable housing as of now. If you want real supply to come in, so you have of course, you have a capital, you have an interest subsidy scheme now, 4% and 3%, you have under the PMAY, you have a capital subsidy scheme and so on and so forth, which are all great, fantastic moves. But the single largest point is that you have to have single window clearance within a time frame, 30 days, 60 days, define the time frame. But that has to happen. Unless this particular thing happens, there won't be a exponential increase in supply, which is what's needed to basically make the housing shortage go away. So it's coming in some states, but it hasn't come in Maharashtra yet. I think we're really looking forward to that happening, in the foreseeable future.
Mr. Vakil, speaking of concerns, let's talk about fundraising and lending to the industry. On one hand, of course, you have options like REITs, you have FDI, which I presume only a larger player can really sort of have access to that. And on the other hand, you have bank lending, which still we are given to understand hasn't really taken off given the NPMS that the industry is in. So what does an MSME do then?
Okay. To start with, the REITs would apply more to commercial office space than to residences, and I think we are talking about residential market.
Absolutely.
So REIT will not impact this for the time being. Although I would like REITs to come to residential the way it's happening in the United States.
Then give us low interest rates, sir.
Yes, and although the rental income would be smaller than in commercial office space, the appreciation is much greater and the REITs can exist in that field, to my mind. But let's not talk about that, right? Now, coming to other sources of borrowing, there are only two possibilities, debt or equity, sometimes mezzanine funding, right? Now, equity is a very expensive way of borrowing money.
Do we
Why?
see a lot of
Because
companies doing that though?
companies are doing it to improve their debt equity.
No option.
Because for every 1 rupee that you take in equity, you can then borrow 2 rupees in debt. So actually you can get access to 3 rupees.
And what you're saying is really sad if you're saying that they don't have much of an option when they're borrowing.
Because you try and understand, these banks, they are not lending you. See, if you put up a factory, so in factory they give you for land, machinery and everything, plus they give you moratorium. And when this factory doesn't work or it goes into BF or anything, they recover the money by selling the land only. But unfortunately, if you tell you are doing a real estate project, they don't fund you on for land or anything. They only fund you for construction.
Okay, I want to come back to what
that's driven by Reserve Bank more than the banks.
Sure.
Because the Reserve Bank has regulated that the banks cannot lend for buying of land.
So this is the time for change. See, when we are telling, when you are bringing in RERA and so many rules and regulations, when you are regulating the developers, so ultimately if you only regulate them and don't give them the free hand or free capital, access to the capital, what I mean to say. So once again, this industry cannot progress.
But industry has found their way out because 50% of the developments today are happening on a basis of a joint venture with the landowner.
Is that the best model to have?
Not.
Well, one of the companies I've connected with, we've got 54 projects which are only done on joint venture basis.
Yeah, but what will happen ki today under RERA, what happens ki RERA, you have to register that landowner as a co-promoter, and the landowner can withdraw his money in the proportionate whatever the construction is done, and he can only withdraw his entire money only after he gets occupation certificate. So whatever joint venture projects earlier you have signed, see, if you see today RERA registrations also, the number is not rising up. It's one of the basic reason is joint venture projects. In joint venture projects where there is land, at least they have a co-promoter introduced, but where there is revenue sharing, it is not even the person who has given the land and having a revenue share model, he has to depend on the developer entirely.
Okay. One thing that we haven't gone into, and while this is an interesting debate and I definitely want to discuss before we wrap up, is demonetization and the impact it's had possibly on demand. I do know that towards the end of last year there was a little slowdown in demand because of demonetization. How are things changing?
Well, I mean, I think last year, I mean, in our segment, the demand didn't fall off. It went off a precipice.
Okay.
When you have customers who don't have money to go and eat food or to go home in a taxi, the last thing they want to do is buy a flat. So November, December, Jan basically was a write-off. Once your money is in the ATM machines coming in, Feb, March, the demand basically picked back up, and now it's pretty much back to normal. So in summary, that's what happened.
Okay, so there hasn't been any concern out of that. But let's talk.
Rather, I will tell you, demonetization didn't at all affected real estate. I will tell you why. Because in affordable segment, see, the major demand is in affordable segment, and post IT boom or telecommunication boom, majority of the deals were happening in full check payment only. See, whatever the money was required, it was either required to get your approvals or to get the lands. See, we never used to get money very rarely we used to get money from the buyer in cash. It was all in check payments.
Okay, we've spoken about the multiple stakeholders in this industry, whether it is buyers, the sellers, the government, or even the bankers. But I want to come to you, Mr. Vakil, and talk about the intermediaries that we're seeing in this space. Increasingly, a lot of homes we see are being bought and sold on digital and online platforms. If you had one piece of advice for MSMEs about how they should be able to leverage the digital platform, what would it be?
Okay, talking of intermediaries, there are two kinds. Ones which you talked about, they're dependent on the technology. They use extensively the technology to kind of market their
And
stuff.
the others are the traditional ones that we've normally
The traditional ones. And if you're talking of the high value segment, I think the traditional broking will definitely continue to have its say. Nobody is going to buy a flat without seeing it, you know. Whereas in technology, what happens is, and let me give you an example. I wanted to buy a flat for my daughter in one of the constructions where only the plinth had come up. And I was buying a flat on the 20th floor. So I said, what is the view going to be? He took exactly half a minute to show me exactly what the view will be from the 20th floor. Because he had installed a camera on the crane, you know, which goes exactly to that level. Of course, drone also is a possibility, but then drone has its own
But how
problems.
should MSMEs use these opportunities?
Now, as an intermediary, if you are able to tell your buyer everything about the project, including the view that he will get from what angle, what level, what is the transparency of the pricing, and all of that, you know. And now it's far easier because RERA registration, he will have access to that information, you know. So I think knowledge will replace, you know, the sweet talk, because you can't sweet talk somebody into buying it. You'll have to convince him with facts and figures and knowledge, you know, compare it with similar projects in the same area and all of that, which an intermediary will definitely do.
Okay, on that very optimistic note, thank you gentlemen very much for being with us here tonight. That wraps up this panel discussion on all the changes that you, the real estate developer, that you, the real estate buyer, can expect to see out of all the multiple regulations that this industry has seen. If you have any thoughts, any opinions that you want us to hear, do remember you can always write in to us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. You can reach us on social media. You can tweet at me personally, in fact, on Sunanda_J, or call us on that number you see on your screen. We promise to have all your questions answered. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.